Hello and welcome to another training session of Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 brought to you by the Letter Tape. This is actually a part 2 of a 2-part tutorial on rides underwater. So if you haven't watched the first part already, the real rides underwater, then go ahead and watch that now and come back here and I'll be waiting for you. So that you don't have these ugly edges to contend with. There's a way to address this, and it also will be bringing up and illustrating something that you need to be aware of to not mess things up. I've turned off the terrain transparency just to assist with this part of the explanation, and I'm going to just build a piece here, and you can see where it crosses through the terrain here. So that's why that first piece, why it could be built to where it's entering the water, because right here that little blue piece is in the water but it's passing through. Now if I try to build another piece, it's a red, and I try to build one, it says I can't do that. Now go to Terrain Tools, Terrain Shaping, and what you're going to do is you're going to raise a terrain piece until it stops just short of where, in fact it won't let me build any higher up. So it's stopping by default. Then go back into construction and try building your piece again. Now you can build your piece because there's just a little edge there that's passing through. Well, actually right here. So right here is where it's passing through terrain, so it'll let you build. So if I build another one, same situation. So I'll go back to terrain shaping and I'll raise that piece as far as it'll go back to construction, and now I can build that piece. So that's fine for coming down at an angle, but let's say that I want to have a straight piece now where I want to go off this direction. Well, if I try to do the same technique where I go back to terrain shaping and I raise this piece, it stops at that level. I go back to construction, I try to do this straight piece, it's not going to let me do this because, as you see, none of the track is actually going through the ground. So what you have to do to address this is you need to hit demolish and actually get rid of this preceding part. So once that's gone, then you can go back to terrain shaping, raise this one more block, and then go back to construction, and now you can do that downward piece, that other downward piece, and that straight piece like you wanted to. And so that's how you can address that. So if it doesn't ever raise enough to allow you to build the piece that you want to, then just delete back one, and then you'll be able to raise the piece. So if we turn this back on, you can see that we are building through this ground here. For going back upward, what I recommend is just start to see what you need. For instance, this was 2 full block sections, and this was 2 full block sections. So to go down a gentle slope to flat, it's 2 block sections. A straight track, it was just 1 section. So if you do the reverse on this end, which I have, it's a mirror image of the other end, I should be able to build the same thing. Now you see it gets stopped right there. The reason being that this wasn't exactly a mirrored image. If you see here, this is just 1 piece high, whereas on this other end it was 2. And I'm also not quite going over far enough. Now there's a couple things that you're going to run into here that are going to be key. The first is, you may think, okay, I'll just raise the terrains another block so that I can go through here. So let's do that. So I have my terrain shaping tool, and boop, there I go. I've raised it 1 piece. So now we go back to construction, try going upward, and there we go. We did it. That's what we wanted, right? Well, that's going to depend entirely on you and your design. This piece has pretty much gone through the middle of that tile, and that tile is now level with the surface of the water. So if we go back to terrain shaping and we start lowering these blocks of ground, everything's great. The ride is still, the way we want it. So then we go to start lowering that piece, and uh-oh, we just lost our water, because this 1 piece right here was level with the top edge of where the water was. So once we started lowering that, it affected the height of the water and brought the whole track down. So you're going to need to be aware of that when raising pieces. There's another way to address this situation that will work better. So to address this, what you can do is back in Adjust Terrain Tiles, use the Freeform Terrain Tile Shaping in place of the one that snaps to ride height, because this will raise in much finer increments, so that here I am just raising it, and I chose this perspective just so you could see how close we are to the surface of the water. Now what you can do is once you get to about 80 or the low 90s, that's actually 81 is fine. If you get any much higher, you're really risking going into the water or above the water. You see there's very little room here between the edge, but that should be plenty for us to go back into construction, and now the ride can go out of the water like we wanted. And it's going to be much cleaner because now we can lower these pieces and the ride is actually coming straight out of the water. Now the same thing can be done at the other end for going into the water. Here I am at the start of a ride then with construction mode, and now if I want to have this piece enter the water, I can just get that piece and I can get that piece, but I'm going through the ground, and that's not the effect that we're really looking for. So if I go forward a little bit more and now try to go through, the problem that exists is that this edge is not within the ground. So to address that, it's the same kind of thing. We'll just be using this other one, and we'll raise just a bit higher, and that should be plenty high enough to catch that edge. So then we go back to construction, and now that piece is just going to catch that edge. And now what we've accomplished is we have the roller coaster going right into the water. So if I go back to this terrain shaping and I lower that piece, now what you have is a much cleaner looking entry into the water. It's not going through the ground, and it just looks a lot nicer. But if it's not that important to you to go through that trouble, you can get to where it just passes through pretty close, so that when you actually have the ride going, it's going to almost look like it's not even going into the ground. You just might run into a little bit more trouble at the other end if you don't gauge it right. So it's really up to you, but if you want something that looks a little bit nicer, then you just need to work a little bit more at it. That's basically how you do it. You just need to remember that the track has to always be going through ground, and you need to be using those modifications to the options.txt file. One other comment to make is try not to have the track going through terrain that's raised too high. Otherwise what you're going to run into, and I'll create something here to show you. Here I've built a track down quite a bit into the ground and then coming out of this tile here. Now the problem is when you lower this terrain. Alright, so lowering this terrain, so you might not be able to see it here, but I am lowering the terrain, and what's happening is if I go ahead and remove the water from here, you'll see this a little more clearly, is that these pieces were just too high and the ceiling area remained. So now what you've ended up with is really an underwater effect like we had before. So you can't cheat and just start building really deep, because these pieces just are not going to be able to lower. It has to be that only a part of this is underneath of the track, but the rest of it's above, so that it can lower. So it's just something to keep in mind, that you can't cheat and just start building into the ground and expect to just be able to lower it. You really have to do this exactly the way it was shown before. So there you go. A ride that goes underwater and goes back in the water. But hope this helps. Hope you make lots of interesting things with this technique. Enjoy.